Hello everybody, Moscow American, back after a few days of a hiatus. I won't lie, sorry about that folks. I've had a little bit of a change in work schedule lately, so I have sort of like several pretty busy, heavy days and then a few days off, so my video scheduling might become a little bit more of this sort of like few videos for a few days, break, few videos, few days, break. We'll see how it works out. Anyway, out in a new area for myself. Did a little bit of a run, some exercise, all that, filming after the fact. So I'm gonna probably be out of breath in the beginning of the video once again. Par for the course. It's beautiful out here. It's really not that far from where I live. It's actually closer than the last place. This is actually, I think, still within city limits. There's that big highway out that way that basically makes this giant circle around the edge of Moscow, and to a certain extent I think like you kind of go outside the city limits outside of that a lot of the times because it kind of runs right on the edge. Anyway, on to the big news. Yeah, the big Alaska summit. It was big, it was great, it's gonna be great, all that kind of stuff. I can't do a Trump, so pardon my even trying. So man, there was all the hype building up to this, all the lead up. Let me see, there's even this wonderful little piece in The Guardian. Who was it? Give me 1 second. There it is. That's my note. Ralph Blair in The Guardian. In this article up there, predicting the nefarious moves that President Vladimir Putin would pull, the narratives he would feed to the poor gullible Trump. You know, he's going to come in there and he's going to say that con man Zelensky kind of pulled one over on a weak-willed Biden, and it's a losing war. Why throw good money after bad? Like, war's going to be lost anyway. So why make that mistake? And the EU and other places, like, they're getting in the way of the potential business deals that could be made. Everyone could be better off. We just move beyond all this stuff. It's a lose-lose situation anyway, just whatever. Yeah, that was like a couple of days ago. I was very confused by that article because he was saying, you know, talking about the ways that Putin was going to deceive Trump, and I'm still trying to figure out where the lie is in that. Like, I feel like when someone says that someone's going to lie and then predicts what the lie is going to be, I always am kind of used to there then being a lie. I'm still trying to figure out, like, I mean, maybe that's part of the issue. It's just so cunning. Like, who expects you to tell the truth, right? Yeah, the war's kind of being lost, and Biden didn't handle it well at all, and Zelensky's just wanting as much money as possible and is not going to negotiate. It's probably a lose-lose, and there probably could be some better business deals. The EU doesn't want this thing to be finished. Yeah, I mean, I guess that is kind of depraved. Telling that much truth to Trump, that's depraved. Absolutely nefarious. Oh well, so there's the predictions going in. That's pretty bad when the predictions are saying, what if he tells him the truth? What if? What if? Narratives have definitely started to shift a bit too, because there was a little piece out there. Oh my goodness, what was it? It was a headline in CNN just like 2 days ago. Yeah, it was saying, like, if my memory serves me correctly, it was Russian forces penetrate Ukrainians' patchy defenses near Donetsk, or in Donetsk region. I know it was Pierce patchy defenses. I know that was the wording they used. The rest might be some shoddy memory, but I looked at it just recently. So something like that. It was a headline, right? Man, we're seeing a shift to where, I don't know, it's dangerously close to some sense of reality breaking through, right? If only. That's been the strange thing about this whole situation, is we're seeing in the West more and more, maybe AI is going to make this even worse, this sort of mistaking social media, virtual reality for reality itself. Like, the whole approach to this conflict, it's been a media conflict, right? Zelensky's background is as a comedian. He's a showman, right? Half of his cabinet, his staff, they're all, his producers, show writers, corporate lawyers, all that kind of stuff from his stage production days, right? His performance days, his TV shows days, back when he was on a TV show pretending to be the president of Ukraine. Funny how that worked out, right? Yeah. Everything about this in the West as well has all been this sort of weird optics ideology of thinking if you can present the image of reality and just declare it to be so, reality itself is going to go along with it, right? This is what we do, right? Some actor says something, gets out of line, some celebrity, you create this outrage campaign, everyone's saying they're racist, they're evil, they're something phobic, something ist, and everyone immediately caves. They kind of lose their career over it, right? This sort of manufactured reality, we've all been kind of trained to just go along with it, pretend it's reality itself. The thing is, it's not. So if someone decides to just not care or not go along with it, if a group opts out, it doesn't really come true then. It's just no longer reality. And this is the whole thing with this war. It's like this sort of insistence. We'll just declare Ukraine's going to win, and we all agree that Russia bad. And it's now just going to happen. And it's like social media campaigns no substitute for rockets, missiles, and artillery shells, right? When reality crashes against social media, reality normally wins. When reality crashes against delusion, right? Like I said before, if I jump off a cliff saying, I believe I can fly, the ground ends up winning. It ends up winning. My delusion goes away because the ground can veto my illusion. I think we might be finally maybe hitting a point where the conflict between the delusion, this sort of social media reality of thinking we can just declare Ukraine's going to win, declare Russia needs to surrender, they're the bad guys and they should be ashamed, and that's what does it. I think we might be finally hitting the point where those reality of on the ground combat, real politics, real economics, industry, production, real tangible technology on the ground, all that stuff's winning over against this game of we're just all going to agree to pretend things are going the way we want. Now, of course, I'm kind of expecting after this meeting to see the frenzy of crazy calls from Macron, Merz, Stammer, the whole, let's put British troops in Odessa, all that kind of crazy talk to come back, because every time you get shaken out of your virtual reality that's nice and comfortable, the real world is just not as comfortable, so people seem to have a kind of a freak out reaction in the West. So I'm expecting to go through a few more days of the freak out reaction, but normally, so far, people have tended to suddenly realize that they can't make their desired fake reality become true in reality with a capital R. So they just kind of go back to the fake media delusion and move on, and so we end up dodging World War III. That's my hope. Anyway, on to the actual summit. So Trump and Putin gave a brief press conference after it was over. I sincerely, to my core, hate when people go and try to make the call on how things went based on this whole in-depth body language analysis stuff. It's ridiculous, right? Every human being is unique. Their indications of how they're feeling stress or how much stress is going to depend on the person. Anyway, it annoys the heck out of me. But I still am willing to do the overall observation of saying, yeah, Trump didn't look as chipper triumphant as he often does. Putin looked pretty confident, but then again, it's Putin. It's always hard to tell. He always looks the same. So the statements made afterwards, I thought it was very funny when Trump was giving his statement. Putin kind of popped in there at the very end. Well, and the next one we'll hold in we hope will be in Moscow. Trump kind of reacts like, well, I'll get a lot of heat for that, but maybe we'll see, or something along those lines, which I thought was quite funny. Man, that would be a logistical nightmare for Secret Service to try and figure out. And oh man. Anyway, as far as the actual meeting, yeah, Trump comes out with his statements. Well, actually, Putin gives his statements first. I won't lie, they weren't as interesting because they were frustratingly appropriate. The very appropriate type things you always say after a diplomatic meeting. Anyone who's an experienced in the diplomatic realm, right? These were constructive dialogues. We were open communications. We're grateful for the U.S. trying to, all those types of things. Acknowledging the shared history, Alaska. There's Russian pilots buried in a graveyard not far from there, from World War II era, when Alaska was kind of the shipping point for a lot of materials being sent to the Soviet Union, right? So it wasn't quite as interesting. I mean, it was polite, constructive, and seemed to indicate that he was optimistic about it going forward. Then Trump's remarks were, they were a bit more interesting. Trump's a lot more off the cuff. He seems to just say what's on his mind or what's going on, and maybe doesn't always think it through as much. But he was saying, it's like, yeah, well, this was a good meeting. I think it was afterwards on the Sean Hannity thing. It was like a 10 out of 10. But we actually found we agreed on a lot of points. There's a few points we don't agree with, maybe one important point, but we actually agreed on a lot of things. It was quite productive. So yeah, very interesting. I think the more interesting thing, though, was his interview with Sean Hannity afterwards. Boy, I can't get through a Sean Hannity interview. He's like so deeply like a military-industrial complex establishment. Like even his lead is like, oh, you were just meeting with the president from Russia, not the Russian president. It's like, oh man, even the underhanded jabs at like, well, maybe shouldn't be the president or something, right? He came in, you had to fly over. That's such a, I didn't say intimidating, but such an imposing show of force or something. Sort of like, oh man, President Trump's whole point is he's trying to make a deal. He wants to be the peacemaker, all this kind of stuff. And you're in there just about, like, I think to a certain extent there's some truth that he's basically trying to sort of sabotage the message. It's about this sort of imperial, come in there, be confrontational. He's trying to almost make it that way when Trump himself is trying to at least present that he's the peacemaker, trying to be the accomplished diplomat, deal maker type person. Anyway, so they get in their discussion. Very intriguing. Hannity actually asked him, it's like, oh, you had so many of these things going for you, right? You had this big trade deal with the EU. And he had listed 4 things, I think, but the big one was like, had this trade deal with the EU. You had like the tariffs, and threatening to impose the tariffs and imposing them on all these other countries. Is this what forced Putin to the table? And I thought it was quite funny because even Trump shot that down. Even Trump was like, no, I don't think anything forced him to the table. He's a tough guy. He came, he wants to maybe make a deal, get through this, but nothing forced him to the table. I thought that was so interesting because that narrative is utterly ridiculous, right? The secondary tariffs have been an absolute disaster. The trade deal for the EU, even there, yeah, that's a big win for Trump, but the whole reason to be involved in Europe is the geopolitical games of, European security, them kind of as a U.S. vassal almost, and this trade deal is going to basically destroy them. So even that's anyway, Trump shot that down, which I thought was very interesting. Quite a moment of reality from him. It's like, no. Then they talked. He's like, yeah, this meeting was a 10 out of 10. And we had a couple of points there. There's one big point we didn't quite agree on, but we agreed on a lot of things, actually. He was Putin's a super tough guy, but it was a very warm meeting, though. It's like, it was good to have this talk and all, like Trump being diplomatic, man. I thought this second term that was out of the question a bit, but he's surprising me. I guess I never quite give up on him, because every once in a while when I'm ready to completely give up, he'll surprise me with something that sounds a bit more level-headed. Anyway, then he made the points, it came up in the conversation, says, and he asks, so what's your advice for Zelensky? And he says, make a deal. Says they're a great nation, and you're not. I mean, you have brave fighters, stuff like that, but it's like, there we go. We're finally getting into the admissions of the multipolar world back that Rubio admitted way back when, right? We're going into the multipolar world. We might actually have multiple superpowers, and Ukraine might be going at it with a superpower, and the one that was backing them is running out of weapons, because it's got to save those weapons to send to Israel. Let's be honest, that's what's going to happen. So, very interesting. Actually, Medvedev, Trump's favorite troll, he put out a statement on his Telegram channel after the meeting, saying, it was kind of the diplomatic stuff, right? It's good to have the bilateral talks, blah, 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 those kind of things. But his last point was very interesting. He said, hey, this meeting, Russia and the U.S. agreed that the sort of like in laying the responsibility on Kiev and the EU to start coming towards peace. That's very interesting, because Trump himself, right? What do you say to Zelensky? Make a deal. This whole thing, when it comes down to it, my summation of it is, it's been a big win for Russian diplomacy. And I guess you could say Lavrov and his team, that's been one area where it's hard to deny they've ran circles around their competition since this whole thing started, has been in the diplomacy realm. Because, like I said, going into this thing, right, Trump might get mad, walk out of this thing, and keep trying to support Ukraine. But now we all know, because even the White House admitted it, right? They're running out of weapons. Trump doesn't want to keep this thing going. So Trump might have gotten mad going into this thing and said, okay, we'll keep supporting Ukraine, but it'll just be the same as it's been, this up and down, and knowing that time is on Russia's side, because even CNN, even the Western media are all admitting that Pokrovsk is in this terrible situation. It's one of the last major defensive areas before you hit open territory, basically from there to Kiev, right? The southeast is pretty built up and was fortified for years. Once these defense lines go, Russian advances are going to be way faster. And they're already a lot faster, even in the fortified areas, because Ukraine's running out of troops and weapons, right? So, time's on their side. Like I said, going in, Trump could have gotten mad, and we'd end back in the situation we're at, but time was still on Russia's side. They were just going to win. It would just slow it down. Or, this thing could have gone well, because Trump could have had a productive talk, which he's claiming he did. I still think he looked a little disappointed, but he's claiming he did. In which case, it'll put the pressure on Zelensky to now be the one who needs to talk, needs to negotiate. And it'll put some pressure on the U.S. to back down a bit, to not do as much as this radical back and forth, support Ukraine to the hilt one day. Okay, well, no, maybe we shouldn't the next, right? It'll force them to kind of stabilize me. Like, no, we want Ukraine to negotiate and dial this thing down. So that's what I was saying going in, is for Putin, this whole thing made absolute sense strategically. And from a diplomatic point, yeah, it looks like it's been a win, I think, just judging right here in the here and now. Now, the fallout from this is going to be the question, right? They managed to now put a responsibility on Zelensky. And if I were a betting man, I'd say there's a 99.99999% chance that he's going to angrily put out some statements saying, no negotiations, no giving up land, you can't negotiate with the dictator, blah, 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 blah. All of his talking points in his green t-shirt. So, in which case, Russia's managed to be reasonable, not burn down any relations with the U.S., and now the pressure's on Trump and Zelensky a bit, because now Trump's going to feel like he has to strong-arm Zelensky. You should negotiate. Who knows? Might put Zelensky in a regime change, dangerous situation if the U.S. decides he needs to go, or puts him in the dangerous position that Trump will get angry and be like, okay, fine, all funding, all support, done. now we won't even sell the EU weapons to give to Ukraine. You never know. That's what could happen. At the same time, I expect what will happen is Trump's going to come under lots of pressure from the neocon type people. So we had this sort of positive outcome from the point of view of Russian diplomacy. Trump will probably end up getting guilted by Lindsey Graham and everyone else into backing it off a little bit. In which case, worst case scenario from the Russian point of view is they end up right where we are now. Didn't lose anything, other than you kept the doors open for some future good relations when this thing ends, which it will. Period. Just how life goes. If something's unsustainable, it won't go for forever, right? So, even if Trump walks it all back, it's still a win, or it was still worth the time from the Russian point of view. I would guess he's probably going to get guilted into shifting a bit, but he's still probably going to be hampered and going all in on supporting Ukraine. He's probably going to have some fights with Zelensky, and it's probably going to continue to damage EU, well, the U.S.'s relationship with the EU, and especially Ukraine, vis-a-vis the conflict. So, yeah, it all made sense for the Russian point of view. I think Medvedev made a very clear point on that. He was saying, yeah, now the pressure's on Ukraine, right? Now it's on them. And depending on how they handle this, it's up to them, right? It's their game to go and screw up now. It's all the field's been left open to them to go ahead now and burn things down. And with how Zelensky's been acting lately, I'm sure he won't disappoint. Him and his green t-shirt will go and say something to tick everyone off on the U.S. side. At least that's my prediction. It would be on brand. So anyway, Trump was saying, yeah, make the deal. And then moving on with his, so I'm circling back to the Sean Hannity interview after a little bit of a digression there. He tells him, make the deal. And then they went back on that whole thing about all the wars he stopped. Man, I have a hard time taking that seriously, because I just don't feel like you can count yourself as being as much of a peacemaker as you think you are when you're putting out fires that your own government started, as often as not, right? India's still ridiculously mad over that whole thing about him solving the India-Pakistan conflict. There's this clip, maybe I'll share it on the video, of this pretty prominent Indian news anchor giving this scathing little talk. It's like, oh, maybe we should all pray and thank Trump that he made, a deal with nature, with God, to keep the sun shining and rain's coming or something like that, because apparently he's just the one who gives us everything in the world now, even though he had nothing to do with this. It was in response to the whole claim that he brokered the peace deal there. And then, of course, Israel, Iran, let's be honest, he's probably got some pretty, you can make a strong case that he's a party to that conflict and might have helped to ensure that it went ahead, or at least could have stopped it before it happened. So yeah, but I thought it was very interesting, both in connection to the Ukraine conflict and just the U.S. in general. Sean Hannity contradicted Trump when he rattled off his 5 conflicts stopped talking point. We'll just go with talking point. Okay, the thing with Thailand, right? Even though, do some digging, it looks like the U.S. might have, been a party to the tensions that helped that conflict break out too. Anyway, I digress. Back on point. I struggle. I digress a lot. He contradicted Trump. Hannity did. So, well, he was actually 7 conflicts. He's like, well, I don't count. I'm not counting the Iran-Israel thing, because that's not over. He didn't say it's not over. That might not be over. That was interesting. He then goes on to say, yeah, we decimated their nuclear capabilities, and they were, within a month they'd had a nuclear weapon. Yeah, sure. Just like Netanyahu's saying it for the last, 40 years? Brother. But, I thought it was very interesting. Now, I don't think it makes sense to put a lot of store in the exact wording that Trump uses because he tends to shoot from the hip and doesn't always pay attention to his own words or choice of words. So you have to like analyze words based on the person. So if Vladimir Putin makes a big 180 or just a change of verbiage on a certain topic he's discussed a lot, you might as well pay attention because he tends to be very, very careful. His inner lawyer comes out every time he makes a statement, all because he's exactly precise. So you can sit there and analyze his words and go, ooh, he changed this from, whatever, this term for this region, Ukraine. He switched terms, which might indicate he's having a switch in how he and his cabinet are approaching the situation or the Security Council. Yes, I would say there's certain people that's valid for. So someone like Putin, who's very precise with his words, when he changes his words, it matters. Trump, not so much. But it was interesting. He's always been saying that they obliterated the nuclear facility like a four-door. Now he's saying decimated. That's a big difference, right? Decimated, just, we're going to be pedantic here, right? Destroyed a tenth of, right? Back the old, I think it came from the Roman term for punishing a military unit by killing 1 out of every 10 men when the unit had done something drastically wrong, right? Decimated is very far from obliterated. And it is Trump, but coming in line with that statement about like, well, maybe the Iran thing, that might not be over, who knows? And, we decimated them. Ooh, that does make me wonder. I feel like we're kind of seeing some indications that he might be thinking that way again. Maybe we're shifting back towards that because we're on the clock back on that, right? I don't even think we could say we had a 12-day war. I think we had a 12-day episode. We're having a pause and we're waiting for the next episode in the series that's going to be this war, right? They were going at it hard, and then we had the leaked information that Israel was running out of air defense systems. And contrary to their media control they tried to have, there was still a lot of footage from on the ground showing that certain areas of Israel were getting absolutely pounded. So they're running out of air defense systems. They reach out to Iran. They say, okay, we'll stop shooting if you stop shooting. They're like, okay, we're ready if you are. But both sides are obviously trying to rearm. Netanyahu is in like full-blown crazy dictator mode. He was giving a speech this week on my backdrop of news I've been looking into because I've been gone for a few days, talking about the greater Israel, which would mean taking over parts of like, I think if you go down the sort of the Zionist rabbit hole, that would imply parts of Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and even Egypt, I want to say. I'll have to go look back on that, but this sort of trying to pull in more of the biblical idea of Israel and all, which, it's a bit vague anyway, because it doesn't, in the ancient world, you're not sitting there with the modern borders, you're kind of just going off of big landmarks, so you're talking all the way from somewhere in Iraq to the Nile River. You're kind of like, oh boy, that's going to be a little vague there, and might spell a lot of crazy conflicts and fighting coming up. But so anyway, maybe Netanyahu's going all crazy conqueror mode a little bit, making some of these claims publicly in some of his interviews and all. Trump's kind of indicating this way as well, so Israel's once again going to be trying to drag them into it. And he's talking this way. No backing down on blockading Gaza, all that stuff. Still not even barely admitting that there's anyone who's hungry, right? Just pre-existing conditions. Right? Oh, these people who die, they keep having pre-existing conditions. Let me think about that for a second. This might be some groundbreaking insight, but if you start starving to death, and you've got one person who's very healthy, and one person who is already a little bit sick, since starvation's kind of a long process, which one goes first? It's kind of like in the Great Famine in China, right? It's a really disproportionate large number of elderly people who died during that, right? They're a little bit weaker, right? and undergoing famines and starvation's a pretty rough experience. So, wow, shocker. A lot of the people who are dying from malnutrition had some pre-existing conditions. Like, yeah, but they probably wouldn't have died of those conditions if you weren't starving them to death. Some of the stuff I see stated is just, it kind of hurts my head trying to wrap my brain around the spin on some of this stuff. Anyway, so yeah, I think Trump is dropping the obvious hints that we're heading that way again, probably coming up soon, a few months maybe. I popped over on occasion some Iranian news sources, and yeah, they're definitely thinking that way too. Some of the speeches and all that have been happening, they've had a shake up in their military command structure. I don't know, I keep wondering what's going to happen with making defense agreements with Russia, right? They're a pretty proud country, so they kind of seem to value their independence and always seem a little hesitant to trust Russia completely, but I don't know, at this point, they probably need all the weapons and all they can get, but we'll see. They're a big country, they're a lot bigger than Israel, but Israel's going to have all the weight of the US behind it. So yeah. So anyway, there's other news that's been going on, but the summit's kind of taken most of my attention of late. There have been updates and all this lead up coming to it. Really still haven't had much substantive. I am very curious to find out what the one point they really couldn't agree on was when it finally gets dropped. I'm sure when Trump, he probably agreed on no NATO. They might have agreed on no EU. Trump would have agreed on that. Why would he care? He wouldn't want him in the EU, or wouldn't care. Crimea probably agreed on. I'm guessing probably something to do with the 4 regions. That'd be my guess. But we'll see. I'm already seeing Western media run with these narratives about like what Putin's demands were, and some of them make me scratch my head because I know President Putin didn't call up MSNBC, CNN, the BBC and tell them what went on in that meeting. So where are they getting it from, considering that even Trump himself, when he was asked about it with Fox News, said, yeah, I don't really want to comment on that yet. So I don't know where they're getting this. I think we get this kind of circular reporting where some rumor gets out there. Everyone reports the rumor until it becomes news. But we'll see. Trump said he was going to be talking with Zelensky and his green t-shirt. So I'm sure if Zelensky's ticked off enough, there'll be all sorts of leaks about things coming out. So news will be out soon. Anyway, it is a absolutely gorgeous day out here. Like, went for a run, got a little bit sweaty, but at the same time, like, it's cool enough in August that it's actually just breezy and comfortable out here. It's actually kind of cooling. Like, it's probably high 60s Fahrenheit. Now, the one thing is throwing me, though, is the blasted leaves are already starting to turn. Like, there are already leaves turning, and we're only halfway in August. Man, I remember one summer we had the leaves turning so late in the eastern part of the Carolinas that it was like almost Thanksgiving, and the leaves were just starting to turn. And here, yeah, middle of August and already turning. I actually quite enjoy it though here, because it's just this time where it's just nice and breezy, a lot more wind than there's been. The summer rain's chilled off for the last couple of weeks. Finally, it was miserable for a little while here with just everywhere you went, you would just carry an umbrella and a jacket because you just get soaked. But it's so beautiful right now because even in the summer it's comfortable. Paradise after being used to the humidity of eastern North Carolina. Or I should say paradise in the summer. Winter might be a little rough, but we'll see. Last winter was mild. All right, that's all for today, folks. I'll be back there soon with another video. This wacky work schedule is getting used to, so I might be a little hit or miss for the next couple of weeks, but I hope to be back on a normal rhythm pretty soon. All right, y'all have a good one.